Part 55. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 541. Chapter 541 Retreat. Mujukin has been living a life of 3-1 in these years, just waiting for Yuan to rise up. This and so on is 100 years. When Yuan came out, Mujukin had not come back yet, so she thought of giving him a surprise later. So she prepared a candlelight dinner. Today Mujukin went out with a few immortals in the city. A few days ago, those immortals found a third-level fairy grass that was about to mature. They can't use the third-level fairy grass, but if they collect it and sell it, they can still sell a lot of fairy stones. Today is the day when it is ripe, so everyone formed a team to pick it, because there was a third-level immortal beast guarding it, and they couldn't defeat it with a few earth immortals. There is no other way but to ask Mujukin to get a share of the pie. Mujukin of course agreed. We all know each other usually, so let's go and help. The third-level fairy beast is not a problem at all for him, and it can be solved in a few seconds. The fairy beast has been dealt with, but those few people unexpectedly had a wrong idea and wanted to take it all for themselves. What they promised was that Mujukin would help kill the fairy beast and give him 2/3 of the fairy stone sold by the fairy grass. These guys felt unbalanced when they saw Mujukin fighting with the third-order immortal so easily. They felt that the promised immortal stone was too much. So when Mujukin was fighting with the fairy beast, he used a formation to trap him and the fairy beast, hoping to trap him there to death. After that, a few people took the fairy grass and left, leaving the city. How could that elementary formation trap Mujukin? After taking care of the immortal beast, the formation was broken in a few strokes. After coming out, he looked around for those people, but couldn't find anyone. Mujukin had to return to the city with a cold face. Although this kind of thing is common, it still makes him feel very uncomfortable when it happens to him. After being used by others, they will be killed. Who doesn't feel angry when it falls on his head? The next time you meet those people, it's hard to get rid of the hatred in your heart without tearing them into pieces. Mujukin hurried back to his residence, waved his hand and opened the formation, and stepped in. Someone at home? Mujukin's consciousness swept away and he immediately flew away. Mujukin hugged Yuan tightly in his arms, his deep thoughts and thousands of words turned into that name. Yeah, Yuan responded softly. Come, let's see what I have prepared. Yuan led Mujukin into the living room. The living room and the dining table are filled with delicacies and candles. Candlelight flickering, extremely romantic. Mujukin smiled, and all the gloom was swept away. Wanner was back and his happy days had come. The two had a delicious meal, and then Mujukin had another delicious meal, and then he asked about what happened to Yuan in the past few years. Yuan said briefly, and then asked about Mujukin's life in the immortal world. Mujukin's childhood was described in one sentence. Apart from being a little depressed today, there really isn't much else to say. In the following days, the two of them kissed each other. After a period of time, Yuan began to retreat. She has to see if the chaos art unlocks anything she needs after she reaches the level of immortal. In the space, Yuan was sitting in the practice room. She scanned the space with her spiritual consciousness. She found that the space had not expanded due to her advancement in cultivation. It was still as big as before. But more solid than before, she could feel it. Yuan doesn't need the space to become larger. The current area is enough for her, but it would be really difficult to manage if it's too big. After looking at the space, she glanced at the little snake, Dehe, and Xiaja. The two snakes and the snake were playing in the space. From time to time, Xiaja turned into a human being and giggled. The blood-devouring demonic insects are currently in seclusion and are expected to be promoted again soon. Yuan couldn't help but smile before she withdrew her consciousness and sank into the sea of consciousness. Xin Chenju has indeed unlocked the skills of the human immortal stage, and also unlocked 3 immortal arts. They all correspond to her spiritual roots. The wood magic still has no offensive power, but it is good for its healing function. Earth magic unlocks a defense and an attack, and the two magics complement each other. Defensive Earth Shield Technique. This technique can be used in combat wherever there are earth-based objects. Sacrificing earth-based objects to create an earth shield can prevent attacks, but it will also be broken if it encounters conflicting objects. Although it is not as good as the divine clothes she wears, learning is better than nothing. Attack Technique, the Heaven Collapse and Earth Shattering Technique. If you have mastered this magical technique, you can instantly sink your opponent to the ground and kill him. Fire magic is inseparable from attacks. This magic technique called Stars and Seas can only be brought into full play with the help of Xiao Zi. The so-called Sea of Stars is nothing more than an increase in the attack area, and the fire rain during the attack is as numerous as the stars in the sky. These magical arts are very powerful but also consume a lot of magical power. Fortunately, her Danshin has been modified and she can perform 4 or 5 moves without any problem. In the past, Xianli was pretty good at being able to perform 1.5 moves at her level of cultivation. Yuan spent 10 years in seclusion before she came out. Since Mujukan was nowhere to be seen when she left seclusion, she simply created a barrier and practiced magic in the barrier. Mujukan did not retreat. He lived the same life as before. Home, outside, city, 3 points and 1 line. It's not that he doesn't practice in seclusion. The higher the level of a monk, the harder it is to improve his cultivation by 1 level. Even seclusion every day is of little use. It is better to go out and practice. Fighting every day can not only temper your cultivation, but also improve your fighting skills. This is a truth that all monks know. After being promoted to an immortal, it is different from when cultivating spiritual power. Many immortals only reach a small level in 10,000 years, let alone a large level. There are very few people as young as Yuan Mujukan who have reached the realm of immortals. This shows the importance of resources. With as many cultivation resources as Yuan, even a hunter can become an immortal, let alone herself. After Mujukan came back in the evening, the two decided to leave here and experience some experience in the fairy world. The fairy world is so big that it is beyond imagination, several times larger than the previous fairy world. This fairy world is also divided into 4 domains, managed by 4 fairy kings, and there is an fairy emperor above the 4 fairy kings. The immortal emperor manages the entire immortal world. A year later, the two came to Xiandu City, the imperial capital of the fairy world. The immortal emperor lives on it. The entire fairy capital city is suspended in the sky. Looking up, the fairy air is floating and fairy birds are surrounding it. There is another city under Xiandu City called Maple Leaf City. The two of them stayed in Maple Leaf City and planned to visit Xiandu City tomorrow. Going to the immortal capital city is not something you can just fly up casually. There is a teleportation array in Maple Leaf City, and one person can use 10,000 immortal stones at a time. The next day, the two came to the teleportation array, handed over 20,000 immortal stones, and then stepped onto the teleportation array, following the immortals who went to the immortal capital city. Yuan discovered that the immortals who went to Xiandu City seemed to be rich people. In the blink of an eye, the teleportation array arrived. The two of them got off the teleportation array and looked at the prosperous imperial capital. The fairy spirit here is very strong, and it can be said to be the place with the strongest fairy spirit in the fairy world. It is also the most arrogant place in the fairy world. The residences and shops in the city are all used to refine fairy weapons. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 542. Chapter 542 Fairy Wu. Over this majestic city is a magnificent fairy palace. There are also many immortal soldiers wearing golden armor patrolling around the fairy palace. That should be the immortal emperor's immortal palace. Yuan was thinking about going to see it at night. Yuan looked away. Neither of them had ever walked in such an arrogant street. Decided to go shopping today. The first store they entered was a shop selling elixirs. From the outside, the elixir shop looked as big as a small attic. Once inside, they realized what was going on. Spatial formation is actually used here. Space formation mages are not often found. It is good to have 1 out of 10,000 formation mages. For example, Mujukin is considered an immortal master in terms of formations, but he still cannot understand space formations. The two of them were looking here and there in the shop. Mujukin was mainly looking at them with Yuan, while Yuan was looking at the grade, quality, and refining techniques of these elixirs. Because she also wants to start refining the elixir. The elixirs in space began to overflow. Now she also needs the elixir and needs to refine some for later use. It is not worthwhile to buy it with the elixir. An elixir costing 100 immortal stones can be sold for 10 times the price. The saved immortal stones can be used to buy a lot of food for the spiritual pets. Yuan looked around and saw that there were no low-grade elixirs here, and they were all of good quality. There are no low-level elixirs such as first-level, second-level, and third-level elixirs. They are all fourth-level elixirs and above, and they are quite expensive. Elixirs and spiritual elixirs are divided into 9 levels. The first level elixir corresponds to the human immortal, and so on. Each level of the elixir is also divided into low grade, medium grade, high grade, and extremely high grade. The lowest grade elixirs in this shop are all middle grade or above. It is considered to sell high-end goods. Shall we buy some? Yuan asked. At present, she can't refine third-level and fourth-level elixirs. Mujukin needs third-level elixirs to reach the heavenly realm. She wants to buy some healing elixirs and prepare them. Mujukin nodded, he thought so too, just buy some healing elixirs. Immediately call the shopping guide. Bring me 10 bottles of your third-level rejuvenating elixir. I want the top grade one. Mujukin pointed to the elixir on the counter and said. I also want 10 bottles. Hurry up and bring them to me. As soon as Mujukin finished speaking, a female fairy wearing ice blue fairy clothes said loudly to the shopping guide. When the shopping guide saw the female fairy, his eyes showed fear. He glanced at Mujukin and said respectfully, Senior, there are only 15 bottles of this high-grade elixir in total. Do you think you would like 5 bottles? Why are you talking so much nonsense? Hurry up and bring it to me, the female fairy said impatiently. Mujukin calmly said to the shopping guide, I'll go first, give it to me first, I can buy 15 bottles. Who are you? Who allowed you to rob me? The female fairy immediately shouted at Mujukin. The movement here attracted many fairies who were watching the fun. When they saw it was this fairy, everyone whispered. Those two people will be in trouble for messing with this guy. Yeah, why are you arguing with her? Just a few bottles of elixir, let her have it. It would be useless to let her and the two of them be afraid. That's right, this ancestor can't be offended. Let's go. Let's go quickly to avoid the disaster of the fish in the pond. Sure enough, some immortals hurried away. Yuan frowned, what is this woman's background? From the immortal emperor's family. Yuan pulled Mujukin, who was about to have a fit, and said to the fairy, Fairy, no matter who we are, we must come first and arrive first. What is the difference between your behavior and that of the person who blocked the road and robbed you? The fairy looked at Yuan angrily and reached out to give Yuan a slap in the face. When did anyone dare to speak to her so boldly? I simply don't know what it means. Snapped. A crisp sound sounded. Ah, how dare you hit me? With a scream, everyone saw clearly that it was the fairy's voice, and the one who took action was Mujukin, who stared at the fairy with a pair of cold eyes. The fairy pointed at Mujukin. When she saw his face, the fairy was instantly stunned. What a handsome man! When the shopping guide saw this scene, he quickly winked at Yuan. Yuan saw the expression on the fairy's face and the look in the shopping guide's eyes that almost made her cringe. She couldn't understand that the fairy was probably attracted to Mujukan. As expected, the fairy swallowed her saliva and her angry eyes turned into obsessed ones. But not long after, she came back to her senses and took a look at Yuan. Her eyes were very meaningful. She turned and left. Yuan shrugged indifferently. As soon as the fairy left the shop, the shopping guide immediately took out 10 bottles of elixir and said, "Senior, you bought the elixir and left quickly." Mujukan took out the fairy stone and paid for it, then asked the shopping guide, "What is that woman's background?" The shopping guide sighed, "Alas. It turns out that you are from out of town. She is the daughter of the Lord of Maple Leaf City. That woman is used to being arrogant and domineering. As long as she has something she likes, she can't get it." "Oh, thank you for telling me." Mujukan collected the elixir and led Yuan out of the elixir shop. The two of them were still walking around in the street, seemingly forgetting what happened before. Some people who were in the elixir shop saw them and were worried about them. Mujukan ordered root wax in his heart for the daughter of the Lord of Maple Leaf City. No one should be offended, but if he offended his Wanur, there would be a good show tonight. Snort. Does that woman still miss him? Let's see if she has that fate. At this time, the female fairy sat on the teleportation array. After exiting the teleportation array, she immediately showed the images of Mujukan and Mujukan to the guards there, and ordered them to intercept them when they saw them coming out. She hurriedly ran to find her mother, who wanted Mujukan to be her Taoist companion. Fairy Menjeo, the wife of Maple Leaf City Lord, was refining elixirs in the alchemy room at the moment. When she saw her precious daughter rushing towards her in a hurry, she stopped refining elixirs and came out. "My son, what's wrong with you? Are you in such a hurry? What happened to you?" Fairy Menjeo asked eagerly, her eyes filled with love. This daughter was born with great difficulty between her and the Lord of Maple Leaf City. The couple cherished her like jewels and loved her very much. "Mom, my daughter saw a man today, and she wants him to be her Taoist companion." The female fairy, Wu Fairy, the daughter of the city lord, threw herself into Fairy Menjeo's arms and said coquettishly, "Man? What kind of man caught my son's eye?" Fairy Menjeo was a little surprised. This was the first time in her life that her daughter fell in love with a man and wanted to be his Taoist companion. "What kind of man? Let mother see," Fairy Menjeo asked gently. Fairy Wu waved her hand, and a picture appeared in the sky. The people in the picture were Mujukan and Yuan. "My son, does that man have a Taoist companion?" Fairy Menjeo's focus was not on Mujukan, but on Yuan. "The main reason is that Yuan is so beautiful that her daughter is not as good as a speck of dust in front of her." Fairy Menjeo frowned. How could that man be willing to be his daughter's Taoist companion? Looking at her daughter in her arms, Fairy Menjeo had an idea. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 543. Chapter 543 Looting. Yes, that's why my daughter is in a hurry to come back to find her mother. She has already ordered the teleportation array to stop them. Then my mother will kill that bitch. How can she be worthy of such a stunning man? Fairy Wu looked murderous. Seeing that her daughter was determined to win, Fairy Menjeo made a plan in her mind. She comforted Fairy Wu and said, "Don't worry, my son, my parents will take care of this matter. Don't appear in front of them for the time being. At least we have to find out who he is. If he is a disciple of a big family or a disciple of a sect, and robs the person, the consequences will be a bit bad." Wu nodded obediently, and she knew that if she went to find her mother would definitely help her. Yuan and Mujukan then visited the formation shop. Mujukan also bought an intermediate immortal formation and a high-level immortal formation, preparing to go back and study them. Immortal formations are not as differentiated as elixirs. In the immortal world, formations are divided into primary fairy formations, intermediate fairy formations and advanced fairy formations. Each level of the immortal formation is suitable for the three major realms of monks. For example, the primary immortal formation is suitable for monks in the three realms of human immortal realm, earth immortal realm, and heavenly immortal realm, and so on. Wanner, let's find an inn to stay in, Mujukan said when they were almost done shopping. Good. If you have something to do at night, of course you have to stay. She has even emptied the Lord God's family fortune, and she is still afraid of you, the city lord. Xiaja has had nothing to do for a long time and has been noisy. The two of them stayed at the Xianju Inn and waited for night to fall. Looking at the time, it was still early, so the two of them activated the formation and entered the space. In the space, Mujukan went to study his formation. Yuan came to the alchemy room and asked Dehe to prepare the elixir, and she started refining the elixir. The first time she refined the elixir, Yuan started from the simple to the complex. Time passed quickly while she was refining alchemy. Yuan put away the elixir she had successfully refined. It was her first time to refine the elixir, and she actually made a middle-grade elixir, which gave her a full sense of accomplishment. It was getting dark at this time, and Yuan saw that it was already past midnight. Although monks make no distinction between day and night, people are accustomed to doing things at night when the moon is dark and the wind is high. Yuan smiled charmingly. She controlled the realm gate and arrived at the mansion of the city lord of Maple Leaf City, asking Xiaoji to find the city lord's daughter first. The woman was meditating at this time, and Yuan's consciousness took away all her storage space, and finally received 2 soul stabs. Yuan left only when he saw her suddenly falling to the ground unconscious. The next target was definitely the city lord. Yuan didn't know who the city lord was, so she simply licked the fingers of everyone in the city lord's mansion. After looting the city lord's mansion, Yuan asked Xiaoji to go to the immortal palace. In the immortal palace, Yuan did not see any immortal emperor inside, only guards and some fairies. Yuan only looked at the fairy palace and stepped back without following anything. Of course it was time to clean up the loot when she came back. She called Dehe and the others and asked them to clean up while she watched. Dehe exclaimed while cleaning, "There were too many things inside. Yuan only cares about how many immortal medicines and immortal stones there are. It doesn't matter whether you have the others or not. Since the teleportation array in Maple Leaf City is so expensive, there must be a lot of immortal stones." Sure enough, when Dehe showed her the storage space containing the fairy stones, she still smacked her lips. At least tens of billions of fairy stones. What the hell, there are too many. However, thinking about the immortal stones needed by the thousands of blood-eating demonic insects to survive the tribulation, Yuan felt that these immortal stones were not many. Yuan cursed secretly in her heart before continuing to refine the elixir and practice. The next day, when the two of them left the inn, they heard many immortals talking about entering Maple Leaf City today. The immortal guards in the city were searching everywhere, but they didn't know what they were searching for. Moreover, many alchemists were invited to the city lord's mansion. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. A person who is hit by a soul stab is still a fool even if he saves it. Yuan didn't kill the woman on the spot because she was merciful. She just wanted to keep that city lord busy, so as not to kill her, the city lord would have time to mess around. Who told him not to discipline his daughter well? If the daughter is like this, her parents are not good people either. When they leave next time, they will still walk from the teleportation array in a swaggering manner. No matter how hard they try, they wouldn't think it was them. It was true that Fairy Manjao lay on Fairy Wu and cried until she was out of breath. The daughter who was fine yesterday became like this overnight. They checked their daughter's body and found abnormalities in her sea of consciousness, but they did not dare to move. We have just recruited several alchemists to see if they can repair Fairy Wu's damaged sea of consciousness, and if they can remove the thorn-like thing on her soul. Although they are transparent thorns, they are immortals and cannot be seen anywhere. But they could not remove the two thorns. As long as they move, the two thorns will explode instantly, and Fairy Wu will belch immediately, so they don't dare to act rashly at all. At the end, the alchemist said, "Madam, unless you find the person who performed this magic, it is a divine soul attack. The person who performed the magic just doesn't want to kill Fairy Wu all at once. Fairy Wu must have offended something people." Alchemist Chen, what do you mean you can't save my little girl? Yes, Alchemist Chen nodded. Okay, I'll trouble you, Alchemist Chen Xiaju, please send Alchemist Chen off. Fairy Manjao called to the little fairy beside her. Little Fairy Xiaju took the order and sent Master Chen out. Only Fairy Manjao and Fairy Wu who were lying on the bed were left in the room. Fairy Manjao caressed her daughter's face as pale as paper, thinking in her mind who ransacked the city lord's mansion overnight and wounded her daughter. Who doesn't know that the storage space has a contract with its owner, but it disappears out of thin air without knowing it, and loses contact with it, and their souls are not affected by the backlash. This is so weird. The person who has this kind of ability to reach heaven is unless he is the one above. But the person above makes no sense. She thought again whether it was the two people who did it yesterday, but her daughter said that their cultivation level was very low. The female fairy was only a basic human immortal, and the man was also a heavenly immortal. It couldn't be them. Unless there is someone behind them. Yesterday, my daughter offended them, so she was sent back with a summons. Then the person behind her came to take revenge? Only this makes sense. In this case, the only option is to ask that person to come to the rescue. Why? It's because they doted on their daughter too much, otherwise she wouldn't have developed a lawless temper. I originally thought that no one would touch my daughter in Maple Leaf City, but I didn't want to step on an iron plate this time. Fairy Manjao regretted it so much that she quickly asked people to wait for the two people at the teleportation formation. She also ordered people to be polite when meeting them and not to offend them. Notify her immediately when the time comes. Yuan Wan walked around for a while, then took the teleportation array down. They were stopped as soon as they got out of the teleportation array. When the two were about to ask why, a beautiful fairy appeared in front of them. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 544. Chapter 544 The Regrets of the Blood-Eating Monsters. You two don't need to be nervous, it was me who asked them to keep two of them. When Fairy Manjao saw the two of them, she couldn't help but sigh that they were really a couple of gods and immortals, and she quickly explained. Who is the senior? Yuan asked deliberately. I saw this woman last night, how could I not know that she was from the city lord's mansion? This fairy is the wife of the city lord. Can you two go with me? Don't worry, I have no ill intentions and will never make things difficult for you. Yuan hesitated and said, Senior, we have never met you. What are you doing? What does it mean? Yuan thought to herself, could it be that what happened last night meant that the fairy thought that there was an expert behind them, and that it was the expert who took action, so she let them go so politely to ask for treatment from the person behind her? Stop telling the truth about Yuan. Fairy Manjao pursed her lips. The two of them were unmoved after hearing her identity. She was probably from a big sect and a big family. It is even more difficult to offend them easily and let them go easily. It's just that the degree is difficult to grasp. She, the wife of Maple Leaf City's lord, usually carries herself very high, but she has forgotten how to lower her stature. Fairy Manjao waved her hand to create a barrier, and she could only smile and said, "To be honest with you two little friends, my daughter offended two little friends yesterday, and I am here to apologize to the two little friends on behalf of my daughter. Something unexpected happened last night. I would like to ask the two friends if they have any elixir or secret technique to heal the soul at home." Fairy Manjao could only retreat in order to advance and ask tentatively. Yuan said calmly, "Senior, do you suspect that we are responsible?" "No, no, no, I don't mean that." Fairy Manjao saw that they were not afraid in her barrier. People with such low cultivation levels have such courage, which cannot be cultivated by casual immortals or small families. Fairy Manjao is even more certain that these two people are not simple. Is there any way to let them stay without hurting the peace? Intuition, everything in the city lord's mansion is inseparable from these two people. With people in the upper city, Xiandu city, and lower city, Maple Leaf city, who don't know about Fairy Wu, the daughter of the lord of Maple Leaf city, they will betray her. Only these two were strangers who came here for the first time, and they had a conflict with their daughter, and then something happened. No? Then let us go, we still have things to do, Yuan said again. This. Senior, do you want to force us to stay? Do you think we are low in cultivation? Yuan was displeased. She let a little snake bite someone after she was so long-winded. Manjao frowned and finally lost her good temper. She said with a stern face, "You two little friends, we are not unreasonable people. I don't ask for anything else. I ask you elders to help my fairy's daughter heal her soul, we don't care about the rest." In other words, they don't want the stolen property. It's funny, why should I help you? It wasn't my elders who hurt me. Yuan was too lazy to tangle with her. She had known she was up there and left. I didn't expect this woman to be quite intelligent, and she must have something to do with them. But so what, even with their unique skills, they don't have the guts to do anything. Yuan waved her hand, and the little snake came out, opened its mouth and broke the barrier, and the two of them walked away. Fairy Manjao stood there dumbfounded. The 9th level divine beast. Let alone killing her, killing everyone in the city is not a problem. Fairy Manjao went back dejectedly. She no longer had the intention to trouble them. She sat in front of Fairy Wu's bed and sighed. Yuan and Mujukan left Maple Leaf City, walked around a few cities and found a place for Dehe and the blood-devouring monster insects to escape the tribulation. After Mujukan laid out the formation, Yuan scattered the fairy stones. Seeing that so many fairy stones would turn into powder later, Yuan's heart ached. First, Dehe transcended the tribulation and successfully became a 5th level immortal beast. After that came the blood-eating demonic insects. Yuan estimated that she and Mujukan had about 1,000 of them left in total, and there were probably several hundred more after crossing over. It makes my heart hurt even more when I think about it. After all the hard work and effort to raise it, I still have to die. But there is no way, we have to let them survive the disaster, otherwise they will explode due to excess physical strength. Yuan sighed for a long time and still had to throw them out one by one to be struck by lightning. The first one was not passed. The second article barely survived and became a 4th level immortal beast. It doesn't look like a worm anymore. At last, after surviving the tribulation, it turned out that only about 800 of them were still alive, and the two of them looked like they had about 400 of them each. Yuan felt extremely distressed. She was thinking about what other treasures could improve their bloodline. "Waner, let's go. It's not suitable to stay here for a long time." Mujukan cleaned up the scene, picked up Yuan and left. After the two left, Yuan found a place where the two of them entered the space. She wanted to find something that could improve the bloodline of the blood-devouring monster insects. At this rate, they will all die. Not to mention how much resources they consume, just because they have followed her for so long. She has to find a way to improve their bloodline so that they can break through the shackles of bloodline the next time they advance to the major level. Mujukan and Yuan were also searching in the library. No matter what level of jade slips they were, as long as they were about monsters improving their bloodline, they had read them one by one. It took 1 year for the two of them to read all the jade slips on this subject. So Yuan sat down to straighten out the blood-eating demonic insect itself. According to the records on the jade slips, blood-eating demonic insects are ancient demonic insects, and their destructive power is extremely frightening. Once they appear, the disaster they bring is devastating. Hardly anyone can destroy it. Therefore, the law of heaven was angry, so it imposed restrictions and stripped them of their ancient bloodline. They would never be able to advance to the 4th level of spiritual beasts for life, which is equivalent to the realm of the monk's nascent soul stage, and restricted their body shape. In fact, in ancient times, the body of the 4th order blood-devouring fairy insect was almost 10 feet long. Compared with the current length of 3 feet, it was simply a joke. In other words, no matter what method Yuan uses, he cannot change their bloodline. The most he can do is strengthen their bodies and purify their bloodline. It is impossible to change the bloodline. Unless the law of heaven lifts their restrictions and restores their bloodline. At that time, the blood-eating demonic insect can become a divine beast, and it is quite aggressive. So, in the end, Yuan gave up letting them grow and let them live in space. Although it is a pity, some of them have at least reached the 4th level of immortal beasts, which is a level that they could not even imagine before. Hey, Yuan sighed countless times and left the space with Mujukan to continue traveling in the fairy world. This immortal world is not only larger in area than the previous one, but also rich in cultivation resources. The two of them were traveling while refining things in exchange for fairy stones. Another 100 years have passed like this, stopping and going. The two came to Yuanj city that day and accidentally met Fairy Furong and his wife. After the four of them got together for a while, Yeju asked them if they were also here for the foreign battlefield. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 545. Chapter 545, Extraterritorial Battlefield. We don't know about foreign battlefields. We just traveled here, Yuan said. Yeju said, you don't know that foreign battlefields are normal. We are the aborigines of the fairyland and know better than you. You don't know that besides our world of cultivating immortals, there are other worlds of cultivating immortals, right? Mujukan and Yuan shook their heads at the same time, but they didn't know that they came from another world of cultivating immortals. But this is impossible to say no matter how good their relationship with the distant couple is. Say no, it means they have something valuable with them. Yeju continued, in ancient times, when the level of immortality was at its peak, the promotion of monks was as easy as drinking water, not to mention the various arts of immortality. At that time, the elixirs and immortal weapons were easily refined. And so on are more powerful than they are now. At that time, there were resources available and they could be used as they wished. Unlike now, many precious treasures have become extinct, and they can only be replaced or simplified. The power of the refined items will naturally be less. And at that time, there were far-reaching cross-domain teleportation arrays between all realms. At that time, a small world suddenly appeared from nowhere, and the resources in it were astonishingly rich. For this reason, many immortal cultivators began to compete for that small world. In the end, they could not compete with each other, and a great war broke out inside. How many immortals have died, and all the treasures in the small world have been destroyed. No one is cheap. Since the war, that small world has disappeared inexplicably. There are powerful immortals who have searched everywhere they can, but they are still missing. Afterwards, no one looked for him again. The major cultivating circles suffered heavy losses due to that war, and some simply cut off their inheritance. In this way, the teleportation arrays between the various realms of immortality were also destroyed, and there was no longer any communication between them. After that, the fairy world calmed down. Later, after thousands of years, that small world appeared again, but after that appearance, the monks went in and could only stay for 10 days before they were forcibly sent out. Then the small world disappeared strangely. 10,000 years later, the small world appeared again, and the monks were forcibly sent out after entering it for 10 days. And then every 10,000 years it will be like this. In a few days, it will be the 10,000-year period again, so most people from the immortal world will come, and we also want to take this opportunity to go in and have a look. Yuan and Mujukan nodded after hearing this. They also planned to go in with Yaoju and the others. You should be careful when you go in, Wanmi's cultivation level is still a bit low, Furong warned. Okay, thank you Sister Furong, we will pay attention to it, Yuan thanked you. At night, the four of them separated and returned to their respective inns. Yuan was thinking, should she let Xiaoju look for it first? Should she find it and go in to see it first, or should they go in together? Wan'er wants to go in first, Mujukan saw a confused look on her face. Well, I'm worried that after we go in first, Yaoju and the others won't see each other when we go in together, and it would be bad if we bump into each other inside. Then let's go in together. Yuan nodded. In fact, she wanted to go in first and take a look. According to what Bai Tianyaja said, this small world should be controlled by others. There is also a divine realm above the fairy realm. It is not easy for people in the divine realm to control a small realm. I just don't know what's the purpose of playing in the fairy world like this. There are too many people in the fairy world. There are not many people who ascend to the immortal world. It takes tens of thousands of years for one to ascend, which is not bad. Well, why don't you take a look at the God realm? When you come here, you haven't seen the God realm in this world of cultivating immortals. Yuan did what she said and took Mujukan into the space, and then she controlled the small world to find the God realm. Xiaoji also searched hard. Master, I feel a familiar atmosphere, Xiaoji said after searching for a long time. Familiar, then the God realm won't be your original world, right? Xiaoji said calmly, maybe, or maybe not. My memory is that I was abandoned at the moment when I was conscious, and then I went to your God realm, where I was robbed and snatched away by others, and finally destroyed. Oh, let's take a look. Okay, Master, wait a moment. After searching Xiaoji for a while, a screen appeared on the opposite side. Many floating palaces. The small world is slowly moving again, and there is a city on the ground, but the city is like a Dharma house, which is made of refined materials. It is not like the city of the God realm, which is made of ore. It seems that the level of cultivation in this God realm is much higher. Yuan looked at it for a while but didn't see anything coming out, so she withdrew her consciousness. In fact, now she can go directly to the God realm, but is it feasible for her to go? Of course not. The immortal realm is about fairy energy, and the God realm is about divine power. Why do you, a person full of fairy energy, go to the God realm? Wearing divine clothes makes you invisible in the fairy world. People in the fairy world cannot see it with their spiritual consciousness, but people in the divine world can see it if their spiritual consciousness is stronger. To be on the safe side, it's better not to wander around. Master, I sensed a small world that is moving. Is it the battlefield outside the territory? Do we want to go and have a look? Oh, go and have a look if you come across it. It's really an unintentional thing. Yuan was also happy. Okay, Master, wait a moment. Xiaoji searched for it after finishing speaking. Master, found. Good. Yuan looked with consciousness, and across the way was a small, uninhabited world. The small world was overgrown with weeds and had a violent atmosphere. There are traces of fighting everywhere. Even after all this time, they are still visible. As soon as Yuan's consciousness moved, People appeared in the small world. Huh, is there someone here? Just when Yuan was about to admire Jukan, she heard the sound of monks fighting. Yuan's consciousness moved and she quickly moved Mujukan out. Is this the extraterrestrial battlefield? Mujukan asked, looking at the messy space. Well, it should be this one. Xiaja discovered it accidentally. Let's go over and have a look. There are sounds of fighting over there. Yuan pointed to the south and said. Good. Mujukan hugged her and teleported towards the south. When the two arrived, they saw a man and a woman fighting together. Their moves and magical skills were all aimed at death. The kind that seems to have deep hatred. However, whoever can fight here can beat you to death. Boom. The male fairy hit the female fairy with a magic spell, and the female fairy fell to the ground injured. Lin 11, hand over your things, and I can spare your life. The male fairy put a fairy sword between her eyebrows at the moment the female fairy fell to the ground. The fairy named Lin 11 spit out a mouthful of blood. She wiped her mouth and said with a sad look on her face, Yang Guang, do you think our Taoist companion of this age is not as good as a treasure in your eyes? Humph. Taoist companion, if it weren't for the power of your family, the devil would want you. He's still a scumbag. Yuan glanced at Mujukan. Mujukan is funny. What kind of look does Wanner have? He is not that kind of person. Ha ha ha. Suddenly, Lin 11 burst out laughing, and her body swelled up. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 546. Chapter 546 A Jade Box. Then Lin 11 is going to blow himself up. The two of them spoke at the same time. The power of self-destruction is too powerful, even more powerful than the middle-grade black plum refined by Mujukan. This Lin Zibai explosion will probably destroy a third of the small world. Yuan did not dare to take that risk and quickly entered the space with Mujukan. Institutions. The moment the two entered the space, Lin 11 successfully self-destruct. After a loud noise, Yuan only caught a glimpse of the cloud that was several times bigger than the mushroom cloud spreading out in all directions. Entering the space, she could see that the outside was like a sandstorm, with sand and stones rushing into the sky or flying in all directions. The two of them came out after the situation calmed down outside. When I came out again, the place was completely different. The place that was already in a mess was now even more dilapidated. The two of them glanced around and found that except for some fragments of their immortal clothes on the ground, there was no trace of their bodies. Yuan sighed and said that woman had a temper and was quite cruel. If you don't give me a way to survive, then I won't even live anymore, and my body and soul will be destroyed. The world of monks is so cruel. The two of them flew to the center of the explosion without much emotion. In the center of the explosion, there was a bottomless pit. There are things scattered everywhere. The two of them looked at it and saw that they were all the remains of immortal weapons, some new and some old, but none of them were still usable. The old ones were blasted out of the ground. Wanner, let's go down and take a look, Mujukan said to Yuan. He saw a lot of corpses and remains of immortal weapons in the place where the blast occurred. In the Great War that took place in ancient times, these should be the remains of those immortals. Good. Just when she was about to fly down into the pit, she unconsciously noticed something like a jade box among a pile of ruins. Yuan grabbed it and the jade box was sucked over. She held it in her hand and looked at it. There was some sand on it. She waved her hand and the jade box was clean. The jade box was as big as her palm, and it was crystal clear, with no fairy energy fluctuations on it. Yuan was curious as to why this box was not destroyed by the explosion. None of the other items were in good condition, but this jade box was in good condition. Yuan couldn't tell what kind of treasure this was. This box can't be what the man named Yang Guang asked Lin 11 for, right? Yuan scanned the box with her consciousness to see what treasures were inside, causing the Taoist couple to fight and even blow themselves up. Huh, there are still restrictions. She quickly retracted her consciousness after encountering the restriction. Let Mujukan solve it later, but she couldn't do it. Yuan threw the jade box into the space. Somebody is coming. Yuan frowned. Someone came so quickly. She quickly flew to Mujukan and flew with him to the bottom of the pit. As soon as the two of them arrived, several figures also flew over in the blink of an eye. The two of them saw that the cultivation level of the four people was higher than them. When the four people saw that they were in the human immortal stage and the heavenly immortal stage, they only looked at them coldly. One of the female immortals raised her hand and was about to kill the two of them. The other male immortal hurriedly pulled her down, shook his head at her, and immediately a barrier was cast to cover the pit, but of course the two of them were not in the barrier. Yuan sneered, the female fairy still wanted to kill them. It's really too long to live. However, looking at their mysterious looks, they must be looking for something. Let's go up, this place is occupied. No, she wanted to see what they were looking for. She pulled Mujukan and the two of them into the space invisibly. She entered the barrier through the gate, and then let Mujukan come out. After coming out, the two stood holding hands and watching the four people looking for things at the bottom of the pit. The two of them had time to see clearly below. There are a lot of wreckage and remains of immortal weapons in the soil at the bottom of the pit, as well as in the soil on the walls of the pit. This seems to be a place where bones are buried. The four of them were rummaging through the wreckage, seemingly looking for any storage space on their fingers. At this time, someone happened to find one on a broken bone. He held it in his hand and looked at it. Needless to say, he was looking at the contents inside. After a while, he shook his head, put the space ring in a briefcase used by mortals, and put it back in his arms. Apparently there is nothing they are looking for. The four of them searched for a while, removed the barrier, and left. I heard from Yeja that many people died at that time, and some people actually cut off the inheritance. These people must be against those inheritances. The two of them also took a look here and left, but before leaving, they filled in the big hole. After that, the two simply hid themselves in the small world and looked around. Subsequently, many people came in, and those who came in were rummaging around, digging almost 3 feet into the small boundary. Obviously, few people gained anything, so a scene of murder and treasure grabbing took place in the small world. If you can't find the treasure when you come in, you can't go in vain. The two of them shook their heads as they looked at it. People died for wealth and birds died for food. Before 10 days have passed in the small world, Yuan and the two have already left. This small world is always digging for treasures. There are still treasures waiting for you to pick up. It is a waste of time in there. I also don't want to see the ruthless killings in the small world. The two of them returned disappointed. They thought they had something good to pick up, but they didn't find anything when they came here. Oh, there was still a jade box. In the space, Yuan gave the box to Mujukan and asked him to see if the restrictions on it could be solved. Mujukan took the jade box and looked at it for a long time and said, "Waner, this box has a high-level restriction, and it's an ancient technique. High-level bands do not dare to take action rashly, and can only be understood slowly. Oh, let's put it up first. Anyway, we're not in a hurry to know what it is." She wasn't interested in formations or restrictions. "It's okay, I'll go study it." Mujukan became interested in this ancient technique. If he can crack it, maybe his formation level can be improved further. Go ahead, Yuan waved her hand. She got excited when she saw someone she was interested in, so she chased him away angrily. Mujukan laughed twice, kissed Yuan on the lips, took the jade box and went to retreat. Yuan rolled her eyes at him and went to retreat. She had to practice the soul stab technique. After she has some space, she can find a place to practice. Yuan came out of the seclusion. Mujukan was still studying the jade box. She shook her head and stepped out of the space. There's someone there. Yuan stepped out behind the three immortals. I was careless, I didn't pay attention before coming out, but this place is so remote, why did these people come here? Where did you come from? The three people teleported away and immediately defended her. One of the female fairies asked her. They were frightened to death. Suddenly someone appeared behind them out of thin air. If he attacked them, they would not be alive now. I was teleported here accidentally. They are afraid, and she is also worried about her space being exposed. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 547. Chapter 547 God-Eating Flower. The three of them looked at her and saw that her cultivation was at the early stage of human immortality, so they believed her. Why are you here? Yuan asked curiously. The three of them looked at each other without saying a word, obviously not wanting to tell her. Yuan was also very knowledgeable and flew to the top of the mountain. This is a mountain, a very secluded place, so Yuan never thought that anyone would come here. There must be something important for them to come. The three of them were not relieved when they saw her flying away. One of them even used his consciousness to see if she was really gone. What Yuan didn't know was that after turning around the mountain, there was a natural cave on the cliff, and in the cave there was a rare God-eating flower. The three people also discovered it accidentally and did not take precautions at the time. This time they came prepared. Just by hearing the name, God-eating flower knows that it can devour divine souls. In fact, the God-eating flower not only devours the divine soul, it also restores the divine soul. Just like the Wu fairy whom Yuan injured before, as long as she refines the God-eating flower into a pill and lets her take it, she will definitely recover. It's just that Yuan doesn't know what's there. But who is Yuan? Knowing that those people have secrets, there is no reason not to find out. She had already entered the space and followed those people to the entrance of the cave. Simon, be careful when you go in. The immortal who asked Simon nodded. He had an immortal weapon to protect his soul, so he didn't have to worry. There is indeed something. Yuan asked Xiaoji to face the cave. Let's explore again with our spiritual consciousness. This sight made her extremely happy. There was a God-eating flower here. This extinct flower actually had one here. The God-eating flower is better than her divine soul liquid, which cannot be upgraded. The higher their cultivation level, the more divine soul liquid they need. This God-eating flower is a fairy medicine now, and can evolve into a magic medicine in the future. How could she not be surprised? And there must be a soul stone underneath. Yuan took a deep breath, and with a sudden movement of consciousness, she took the God-eating flower to the side of the black pond and planted it. If you don't accept those three people anymore, we will accept them. After collecting it, Yuan checked the place where the God-eating flower was, all the way down the mountain. Sure enough, there was a soul stone about 1 foot square, about a foot away from where the God-eating flower originally grew. Yuan collected the soul stone with a flash of consciousness. Whoops! In the midst of lightning and flint, a black ball rushed into Yuan's sea of consciousness from the place where Mujukan was retreating at extremely fast speeds. Huh? There is a divine weapon to protect me. When did the divine weapon become a cabbage in the fairy world? The black ball was still talking in human language. Yuan then realized that this was a divine soul, and she wanted to take her away, but she didn't expect that both she and Mujukan had divine weapons to protect them, and it couldn't take away Mujukan who came to take her away. This idiot! To seize her body is to seek death. How did you get here? Yuan asked. Where did this come from? Why can't I be here? I finally escaped from danger and met two good bodies. It's a pity that I can't help it. You are sincere. Yuan guessed that the spirit came from the jade box. Did you come out of that jade box? Yes. The soul has been looking around in Yuan's starry sky-like sea of consciousness. Tisk, 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 the little girl's cultivation level is so low, and her consciousness sea is so wide, her soul must be powerful, but it's a pity that I can't take it away, Shenhun said without scruples, completely without the awareness that someone would destroy her at any time in other people's consciousness sea. Yuan has never seen arrogance like this. Aren't you afraid that I will swallow you up? Do you know? Yes, you brought it to your door yourself. Yuan's tone was sinister. The soul finally realized the crisis. It flew out of Yuan's sea of consciousness without even thinking about it. Then it flew around in space, seeming to want to fly away. Mujukan, who had already arrived, saw the soul flying out of Wanner's sea of consciousness. Although he knew that Wanner had a divine weapon to protect the soul, he was still worried. This time I breathed a sigh of relief. How are you? The two asked at the same time. The two looked at each other, smiled, and shook their heads. Wait for me and deal with that thing first. Mujukan nodded. Yuan's consciousness moved and he restrained the soul to prevent it from running around. If it figured out the situation here and couldn't take them both, it could still take the little snake and the blood-eating monster insects. Thinking that there was an artifact protecting the soul in the space, Yuan gave the artifact to Xiaoxi and Dehei, as well as the golden dragon released by Mujukan. After doing this, she and Mujukan returned to the wooden house. Let's say that the man named Ximen outside entered the cave and went straight to the god-eating flower. When we got there, we saw that besides a pit, there was also some kind of god-eating flower. Simon's head was buzzing, and he stayed there not knowing what to do. Before entering the cave, he used his spiritual consciousness to see that the god-eating flower was still there, but it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Don't say that people outside don't believe it, even he doesn't believe it. Ximen's consciousness searched up and down in the cave, but there was no formation or anything like that. Why did it disappear out of thin air? I originally wanted to pick this god-eating flower and go to Maple Leaf City to exchange for fairy stones, but it was ruined. 100 million immortal stones, the fat in your mouth flew away. When the man and woman outside saw that he hadn't come out for so long, they looked at each other and immediately flew into the cave. Simon, what happened? It took so long to get it done. The two of them saw him standing there, thinking that his soul had been devoured by the god-eating flower, so they even touched him. Ximen came back to his senses and said with a wry smile, the god-eating flower is gone. What do you mean, disappeared? What do you mean? The female fairy screamed, her temper was quickened, and she asked him immediately. It means missing, that's how it looked when I came in. Simon pointed to the pit. The two of them didn't believe it. They were telling a joke. They were there just now, how could they disappear all of a sudden? How could it be possible? Simon must have wanted to keep it to himself. The two men looked at Ximen in a wrong way, and they immediately took a few steps back to defend themselves. Seeing their posture, Simon couldn't even laugh or cry. He said, I have no need to lie to you. After all these years, you still don't know who I am? Do you think I will still devour the divine flower by myself? The two of them were still defending him with expressions of disbelief. He had every reason to keep it to himself. His cultivation level was higher than the two of them, so he just had to kill them. But it's not necessarily possible for the two of them to join forces. Ximen knew that they didn't believe it, but he really couldn't explain it clearly, so he raised and said, I, Ximen, swear that I did not get the god-eating flower. If I swallowed it all by myself, I will be haunted by inner demons from now on, and I will not be able to cultivate even an inch. The two of them saw that he had sworn the inner demon oath, but they still did it based on his cultivation. They believed in him, but from now on they were strangers to him. The two of them looked at each other and flew away immediately. Ximen only said that he did not get the god-eating flower, but did not say that he would not kill them. Ximen watched the two people go away and couldn't help but shake his head and disappeared into the cave. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 548. Chapter 548 Give Opportunity and Good Fortune. Yuan's small move ended Fairy Wu's life without her realizing it. At the moment, she and Mujukan were looking at the contents of the jade box in the wooden house. Inside was the inheritance left by the ancient monks that people were looking for frantically. The contents on one of the jade slips surprised them. It turns out that the emergence of that small world is indeed man-made, not natural. The purpose is to reduce the energy consumption in the world of immortality. In the world of immortality, all energy comes from an energy planet in the center of the interstellar world. This energy ball has existed for an unknown number of years. During several wars between the gods, the energy ball was accidentally affected, resulting in the energy ball being damaged, a large amount of energy leaking, and the energy ball's energy declining sharply. However, it was the heyday of cultivating immortals at that time. Too many monks absorbed energy for cultivation. In order to reduce the consumption of energy, the god realm threw such small worlds into various cultivating worlds to let the monks kill each other. At that time, the gods who refined this small world couldn't bear the powerful power of the gods to do this, so they left a message to let people in the immortal world know not to be fooled. The energy will not be used up immediately, not to mention that the energy consumed by the fairy world and the 3,000 worlds is less than 1/10 of the energy consumed by the divine world. It is better to destroy some gods than to destroy them. A consumes more energy than an immortal. There are so many damned people in the god realm, why can't they be killed? And the owner of this jade box is the soul. She was originally an immortal with not the highest level of cultivation in the world of immortality. She accidentally learned the news and was very frightened at the time. She wanted to quickly inform the immortals in various immortal worlds, but unfortunately the war had come to an end, and the few immortals left behind were on the verge of death and did not have the life to leave this small world. After she came out, she looked at the corpses of the immortals and beasts scattered everywhere. She collected all the things she could collect and put them in her space jade box, and then buried the corpses of the immortals and beasts. When she came to the immortals who were not completely dead, they saw that she still had a complete body, and some of them wanted to take her body. So the souls of several people flew into her sea of consciousness at the same time and began to seize their bodies. This fairy is also a ruthless person and is about to detonate it. At the moment of detonation, her soul immediately enters the jade box. But after she entered the jade box, her soul was seriously injured. Several souls took away her body. Her survival was only because she had this jade box. But she knew what the consequences would be if the soul could not be repaired. You will gradually forget many things, even forget who you are. So when she still remembered some things, she immediately left this jade slip. Then a ban was placed on the jade box. After that, he fell asleep in the jade box. She didn't wake up until Mujukan broke the restraint. After the two of them finished reading, they were silent for a long time. Suddenly, Mujukan said, "Wanner, what do you think? How about sending her soul into the body of that fairy Wu?" "Okay, anyway, that Wu is not a good thing. If we don't save her, she will either die or be turned into an idiot by someone powerful enough to pull out those two soul thorns. How can I say that the fairy has preserved so many important things and left such important information behind? Although she can't use these inheritances, Mujukan, his sons, and his eldest brother can all use them. Besides, she is having a headache about how to deal with this soul. Since she has this opportunity, she doesn't mind giving this good fortune to her. She gave them an opportunity, and they also gave her a good fortune. Let's call it even. The two of them did what they said. Yuan immediately controlled the realm gate and arrived at the Maple Leaf City Lord's mansion. The two of them disappeared. At this moment, there is only one maid in front of Fairy Wu's bed. Fairy Wu is lying on the bed, still breathing a little. Without treatment, she would not live long. Yuan didn't sympathize with her. Such an arrogant and domineering person would still be an arrogant and domineering person after being rescued, and he didn't know how many evil things he would do. Give your body to others so that they can have a chance to live. It can be considered that she has done a good thing for others. It is estimated to be the first and only one. Mujukan had no good impression of this woman. He created a barrier with a wave of his hand. Yuan waved away the two soul thorns, and then sent the soul into Fairy Wu's sea of consciousness. Soon, Fairy Wu's face was filled with pain. The color of pain disappears in just 10 breaths. After a few dozen breaths, Fairy Wu's face began to turn rosy, and then she slowly opened her eyes. She only saw a barrier covering her and no one was in sight, but she still said, "Thank you." Then he lay down again and closed his eyes and fell asleep. Yuan knew that she still needed a recovery period, so the two of them withdrew the barrier and returned to the space. Leave Maple Leaf City. A few days later, Wu woke up and saw that she was penniless. She didn't think it was a serious matter, but was glad that she had a body. She has all the memories of Wu, but she has very few memories of herself. She only remembers that she is from the fairy world, and no one knows her last name. She slept in a box for a long time after she blew herself up. When she woke up, she ran to seize the bodies of two people. Those two people actually had artifacts to protect their souls. The corners of Wu's mouth twitched. The two people she had taken away from her in her memory were the two people she had offended before the accident. Needless to say, it was also those two people who played a dirty trick on Fairy Wu. However, only she knows this, and no other person will ever know. After all, she was given a chance. People who cultivate immortality pay attention to cause and effect, and she is not an ungrateful person. It's just that she took this body from her, and she was afraid that it would be exposed sooner or later. Wu thought that she had to run away quickly before Wu's parents found out. So Wu quickly left a jade slip, exchanged clothes with the maid, transformed into the maid, and quickly left Maple Leaf City. When Fairy Menjao learned about it, it was already the next day. She was surprised and happy when she took the jade slip left by Wu. Immediately sent people out to find Wu and protect her. Wu said on the jade slip that the person who attacked her only punished her and did not want her life. She is now enlightened, so she goes out to practice so that they don't have to worry. Wu would go back wherever he went, and as soon as he went out, he would find a place to retreat. On the other side, Yuan and Mujukan cuddled together, sitting on a mountain peak and watching the sunset. They are not worried about the energy ball. It is still very far away for them now. Everything must come to an end. Just live well while you are alive. 1,000 years passed quietly. Mujukan, let's go to the reception platform to wait for our son. The two of them had just returned from the spirit world. The two treasures were preparing to ascend in the past few days, so they returned to the fairy world to pick them up. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 549. Chapter 549. Two treasures ascend to the fairy world. Mujukan, okay, let's go right away. After 1,000 years, the two treasures were finally about to ascend to the fairy world, and neither of them could restrain their excitement. By ascending to the immortal realm, they will not only have a longer lifespan, but they will also be able to travel to the immortal realm with their sons in the future. The whole family can practice together again. However, in the past 1,000 years, the two of them have not made much progress in their cultivation. Yuan is also in the late stage of human immortality, and Mujukan is only in the great perfection of heavenly immortality. The higher the level of cultivation, the more difficult it becomes to advance. It's pretty good to be promoted in 1,000 years. In addition, Yu Heiran's brothers in the spirit world are about to ascend. Yuan can't help but sigh that they are really working hard. If she works so hard, she will probably be promoted to the earth immortal soon. The most troublesome thing is still Xiaoliu. Yuan estimates that she will never be able to ascend in this life. Everyone has lost their temper towards her and has no choice but to leave her alone, as long as she is happy. When the two of them arrived at the reception platform, the two treasures had not yet ascended, so they waited. 5 days later, there was a flash of light on the reception platform, and a person was thrown out, and then directly into the spirit washing pool. The two of them looked at it with their consciousness and saw that it was a big treasure. The two of them breathed a sigh of relief. The next day, Urbeo was also thrown into the pool. Then another person came in. It turned out to be Yu Heiran. The two of them were very happy, and their eyebrows were curled up in laughter. 3 days later, the two picked up the three of them and returned to their new residence, Fengdu City. As soon as the three of them came back, they went to retreat, and Yuan returned to the reception platform to guard. Staying in space for too long. Stay here to guard. Yu Heiran said that when Dabao ascended, his brothers were all watching and comprehending below, and he was the first one to succeed in enlightenment. There should be people flying up from behind. Sure enough, 10 days later, Xiao Qi took the lead in ascending. The ones flying up one after another are Yu Hao, Yu Haoshan, and Xiao Wu. Even Bai Zi soared up this time. Yuan was surprised. Bai Zi himself did not expect that. He originally wanted to spend more time with his wife and sons in the spiritual world, but he did not want an epiphany to make him ascend directly. Thank you, Xiao Sier, and you Bai Zi thanked the brothers and sisters sincerely. Bai Zi's thank you contains too much. Ha! Yu Heiran waved his hand and said, Uncle Bai, don't be so polite. All this is due to your persistence. Yes. Bai Zi sighed. Fortunately, he didn't compromise in the first place and waited for all this. However, the whole journey of cultivating immortality is still attributed to Xiao Sier, there is no doubt about this. Uncle Bai, everything in the past is over. Come to the immortal world and practice hard. This immortal life has just begun, Yuan said with a smile. Ha ha ha, Xiao Sier is right, our magical days have just begun. Everyone was amused by Yuan's words, which also aroused hope in their hearts. This party ended after 3 days. After the party, everyone went back to their houses to absorb the magic power that they had eaten. It's good to follow Xiaocer, you'll have plenty to eat and good welfare. Yuan was also unconscious from drinking, and was carried back to the house by Mujukan, and the two fell asleep. This amount of immortal power is not much for them, and they will be fine after just a little sleep. In the days that followed, everyone followed Yuan and the others into the mountains to hunt fairy beasts and collect fairy medicine. Having just ascended, they still don't have the strength to go out and practice. Everyone followed the two of them to practice and improve their strength while adapting to everything in the fairy world. 1,000 years passed like this, and some people from the spiritual world ascended. The first person to ascend was Wu Sheng. After that comes Stone. After that came the Feng family, Yan'er and Yi. Another 1,000 years later, almost all the people in the spiritual world have ascended, except for Xiaoliu, whose lifespan has expired and passed away. Even Mr. Mu is no exception. In this way, everyone is together again. Bai Zi and Yu Heiran have been in the immortal world for 2,000 years. Not only have their cultivation levels been promoted to the great perfection of human immortals, they have also settled down in the immortal world. After all the people in the spiritual world ascended, those with families separated from everyone else and lived alone. In the end, only their family of 4 was left. Over the years, her cultivation has reached the level of Earth Immortal, and she is now in the late Earth Immortal stage. This is due to the 2,000 years of constant fighting with immortal beasts in the immortal world, which allowed her cultivation to grow so quickly. Not to mention Mujukin, he was originally a swordsman, and his cultivation level was rising as if he were drinking water. Now he is a golden immortal. The top level of the heavenly immortal is the true immortal, followed by the golden immortal. In other words, he has crossed 2 great realms. It's simply worse than her cheating. On the other hand, my father and mother on earth got older and passed away one after another. Yuan then remembered that Xiao Zi had told her about her life experience before. She was curious and wanted to see who she was. So Yuan couldn't sit still, so she and Mujukin went back to their original divine realm, the Ziwei Shrine. The 2 of them came to Ziwei Palace invisibly. Yuan asked Xiao Zi, do you still remember how you were conquered by me? Xiao Zi thought for a while and said, the master was already at that time, and I fell from the sky when I was born. It was in this place. At that time, this place was full of mountains, and the master was training in the mountains. I smelled the breath of the power of the stars and found the master, and concluded a contract with him. There are no thrilling scenes. Master, you are overthinking. Everything does not have to be made to death. You have the power of the stars and are destined to be my master. There is no thrilling scene. Master, you have persecution delusions. Yuan, does she have it? Xiao Zi, you have it? At this moment, Mujukin walked around several palaces and came back. He shook his head at Yuan and said, Waner, let's get out of here quickly. It's clean here, as if someone comes here often. Yuan was stunned. This is in a small world, is it the Lord God? Have you not given up after all these years? Yuan nodded and immediately returned to the space. As soon as the 2 of them entered the space, a figure immediately appeared. If it wasn't the Lord God, who else could it be? Yuandu had to sigh at this crazy persistence. Thousands of years have passed, but he still remembers it. After looking around for a while without finding anything, Yuan stopped looking. She thought of it on a whim, but she didn't expect it to attract the attention of that crazy person again. After Yuan left, the Lord God stood in front of the Ziwei Palace with a gloomy look. Her aura was still here. The Lord God became so angry that he destroyed all the palaces there. I originally wanted to use this place to lure the crepe myrtle out, but I couldn't catch her even when she came. Escaped again. The Lord God has lost his patience. Destroyed the palace and even the small community, and then left in a rage. End of this chapter. The Brave Life of a Space Peasant Girl. Author, Lan Department. Chapter 550. Chapter 550 Mutated Species. The 2 of them returned to the fairy world and still lived the same life of fighting and killing. The fairy world has been too peaceful these years. Except for the rumor that Fairy Wu disappeared for no reason at that time, basically nothing major happened in the fairy world. Everyone is living a life of cultivation step by step. It's just that such immersive days cannot exist for long in the world of immortal cultivation. They are most likely a precursor to the coming storm. The 2 of them were collecting fairy medicine in the mountains that day. Fairy Furong sent a message that a strange thing happened in Yuchen in the southeast of the fairy world. Yuchen was trapped in an unbreakable barrier overnight, which even the immortal emperor could not break. Let them never go to Yuchen. Of course Yuan wanted to join in the fun, but there was no way she would tell Furong. After she replied to Furong's message, she decided to go back and see what happened. What kind of barrier can't even be broken by the immortal emperor? Have people from the god realm come down to cause trouble again? The two hastily gathered some elixirs and returned to Fengdu City, and then activated the formation to enter the space. Yuan then controlled Xiaojia to search Yuchen. Not long after, Yuchen appeared opposite the boundary gate. You can clearly see a city shrouded in a barrier, but you can't see clearly inside the barrier. There are many immortals outside controlling the fairy weapons and constantly attacking the barrier, but the barrier does not move at all. Yuan let Xiaoji enter the barrier. Xiaoji immediately flashed. When he reappeared, she saw everything in the city. There was no one in the city, it was quiet. Yuan suddenly appeared in the city with her consciousness. She searched around and found an empty city. Not a single living creature. Just when Yuan was wondering, the space in the city suddenly distorted, and a teleportation array appeared, sucking her in. Yuan gave up her resistance and let the teleportation array teleport her away. The teleportation array seemed to be far away. I don't know how long it took before the teleportation array threw her out. Yuan suddenly stood up, and before she could recover, an attack hit her. She stepped out of the way. As soon as she stepped on the star step, immediately became invisible, and then flew into the air to watch the scene in front of her. It turned out that this was a battlefield, and the human monk was fighting a creature that she had never seen before. That species looks like a plant, a stone, an animal, a human, all in all kinds of strange things. They fly, float, or stand on the opposite side of the human monks. Some can breathe fire or water, and can use wood magic, ice magic, and thunder magic. In short, they can use any magic that exists. Out. And the attack power is very strong. Any monk who is attacked, as long as he is defeated, will immediately turn into a wisp of smoke and disappear between heaven and earth, without leaving a trace of his soul. What species are these? Yuan searched in her mind while hiding. It's a pity that she went through her memories and didn't know what they were. It was as if these things were new species that had mutated. Yuan's face darkened. Some must have brought all the monks from the city here to fight against these mutated species. It should be said that he used the monks as a test. Abnormal. Yuan moved Mujukan out of the space and told him in a few words what was going on here. Mujukan was also very angry. Who had been killed 1,000 times, did such a cruel thing? Without saying a word, the two summoned Xiao Zi and Nanming Liwo and asked them to burn the mutated species. There were also small snakes, diamonds, golden dragons, and blood-eating demonic insects, and the two of them released them all at once. The two of them did not take action, standing in the air and paying attention to the spiritual pets. Whoever is not as good as them can lend a helping hand. Their spiritual pets will not let any of them die except those who die in thunder disasters. The two people's consciousness followed, and they saw Xiao Zi and Nanming Liwo, who were the first to go out, rolling straight towards the mutated species like two fireballs. The two fires brought scorching heat, and those mutant species that were not burned were roasted and deformed, and they lost their combat effectiveness. Some monks saw it, and quickly hit them with a fatal blow, killing them. Kill. Those that are touched will turn into smoke and disappear. Some monks discovered an extra spiritual pet that suddenly appeared to help relieve their pressure. Some who were seriously injured and couldn't support themselves were finally able to take a breath and swallow a healing elixir. The little snake on the other side transformed directly into its true form, opened its mouth and swallowed the mutated species into its belly. He also smacked his lips, looking like it was delicious. After swallowing, he opened his mouth and breathed hard, and those small and weak mutated species were sucked away by the tornado-like suction of the little snake. But Yuan discovered that as long as there was a place that was swallowed, mutant species would immediately replace it. An endless supply. The same goes for Dehei and Jinlong on the other side, as if these are not fatal things, but delicious feasts. The two of them roared to the sky, bent down their huge bodies, opened their mouths, and swallowed a large number of mutated species into their stomachs. Not to mention the blood-eating demonic insects over there, they pounce on those mutated species like crazy and devour whatever they catch. Yuan and Mujukan were stunned. Is it possible that these mutated species were transformed by what kind of energy? The two of them didn't know, so they just looked at it. The monks who were fighting below were all shocked when they saw it. Why couldn't their immortal beasts directly devour those mutated species like this spiritual pet that suddenly appeared? But help them get a chance to rest, at least they won't die immediately. Everyone, listen, those who are capable of fighting should not relax, and those who are unable to fight should heal their wounds quickly. At this time someone was shouting loudly. It's the city lord. The city lord is not dead yet. Hurry, let's do what the city lord ordered. Come here. You go and heal. You make up for it. Someone will make conscious arrangements immediately. Yuan looked at the city lord. At this time, he was almost exhausted of his immortal power, and there was only a double-winged tiger beside him to block the attack for him. There is no danger yet. With the addition of Yuan and their spiritual pets, within an hour, the mutated species had the intention of retreating. Yuan told them not to pursue them and let the mutated species retreat. Sure enough, the mutated species gradually disappear, but disappear out of thin air. Yuan frowned, not knowing what was going on, so she had to take the spiritual pets back and enter the space together. In the space, all the spiritual pets fell into a deep sleep. Yuan looked around and stopped at the blood-devouring demonic insects. Their blood-red shells were cracking and shedding. At the same time, dark blood is discharged from the body. The body is also growing gradually. Yuan looked at the scene in surprise, feeling like they were mutating. She immediately called Mujukan. Mujukan's spiritual consciousness was much stronger than Yuan's. He carefully used his spiritual consciousness to observe the changes in the bodies of the blood-devouring demonic insects. Sure enough, their meridians were thickening and their blood changed from red to light gold. This situation is very similar to breaking the seal in the body. It turns out that the blood-eating demonic insects have always had red blood that is only available to low-level demonic beasts. Now the blood is turning into pale gold, which is enough to show. End of this chapter.